Hello, my dear students. How are you? Hope you all are fine. I'm also fine. Today I'm back with another lesson, and today's class is very important for all classes because actually it will help you to understand simple, complex, and compound. And you will know that it's also a part of English grammar, and this is a very important part. So let's get started. Sometimes most of the students can combine the dependent clause and independent clause because actually they don't understand it. Independent clause, we can say independent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb, and it makes sense on its own as a sentence. So we can say it can be a sentence. Okay, now I'm writing the definition of independent clause. Independent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. And you should know that actually to make a clause, of course, you need a subject and a verb. Without a subject and a verb, you can't make a sentence or you can't make a clause. So it's also the same. Dependent clause actually the two definitions are the same here. Dependent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. So what's the difference? Yes, dependent clause can't be a sentence. But on the other hand, independent clause can be a sentence. Is a sentence. But why? Independent clause is a sentence, but dependent clause can't be a sentence or is not a sentence. We should know the why. Because it doesn't make sense on its own, but it makes sense it means actually I want to say that an independent clause conveys a complete thought, but a dependent clause doesn't convey a complete thought. So now let's see some examples of dependent and independent clauses. For example, for example, Rishita ate rice. Because she was hungry. The poor are happy, though they don't have enough money. Kamal didn't go to school as the weather was bad. So look at the three examples of dependent and independent clauses. Here, the first example is Rishita ate rice or Rishita ate something because she was hungry. Actually, Rishita ate rice it conveys a complete thought. Because she was hungry, but it doesn't make a complete thought without helping this sentence. So actually to make a complete thought of dependent clause, a dependent clause needs an independent clause. Without taking help of independent clause, a dependent clause cannot make sense on its own. The second example is the poor are happy, and here I'm writing though they don't have enough money. Though they don't have enough money, without taking help of these, it doesn't convey complete thought. But without it, it makes sense on its own, or it is a complete sentence. It is not complete, it is incomplete sentence. Kamal didn't go to school. This sentence conveys a complete thought as the weather was bad. But this sentence doesn't convey a complete thought. To make sense of dependent clause, a dependent clause needs help of independent clauses. These three types of sentences are independent clause, but these three types of clauses doesn't make sense on its own, so these are called dependent clause. It doesn't convey its meaning, and we should notice that because, though, as. From these three types of clauses, actually we are getting an idea. What are the ideas? What is the idea? The idea is actually to make a dependent clause. Of course, you need some subordinating conjunction and subordinating conjunction before the clause. She was hungry. This is independent clause. But when we will add because before she was hungry, then it's called independent clause. Because without the conjunction because, actually it makes sense on its own. It is also the same. They don't have enough money. It will convey a complete thought. But when we will add though subordinating conjunction, then it doesn't convey complete thought. And to make the sentence complete, actually we need extra information. So we can say dependent clause needs extra information here. Dependent clause needs extra information. Dependent clause needs extra information, but independent clauses don't need extra information. Hope you will understand actually. Here I'd like to say that the definitions again. What is dependent clause and what is independent clause? Dependent clause makes sense on its own as a sentence. but independent clause makes sense on its own as a sentence, but dependent clause doesn't make sense on its own as a sentence. And of course there's a structure. Now I'm writing this structure. Dependent clause, the structure of independent clause is subject plus verb. Subject, structure, subject plus verb. S stands for subject. Structure, subordinate conjunction plus subject plus verb. When you will add subordinate conjunction before a clause, then it will be a dependent clause, but without subordinating conjunction it will be an independent clause. What is the criteria of independent clause? It conveys a complete thought, but it doesn't convey a complete thought. And dependent clause needs extra information to complete its thought, but independent clause doesn't need. Hope you will understand. Now, please write the following sentences. She goes to school. When they reached the station. As he was ill. And they arrived at the station. John has a brother. As they read the book. Write these sentences, clauses, and identify what the dependent clause is and what the independent clause is. She goes to school. Try to understand, please. She goes to school. Is it dependent or independent? I think you will understand. Right. This is independent clause because there is no any subordinate conjunction before the sentence, before the clause, and it makes sense on its own. It doesn't need any extra information. It's a sentence. There is a subject, there is a verb, but there is no any subordinating conjunction. So this will be independent clause. When they reached the station, please look at the clause. When they reached the station, does it make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. Before the clause, here there is a subordinate conjunction, and we know that the structure of dependent clause. What is the structure? What is the structure? Yes. A subordinate conjunction plus subject plus verb. A subordinate conjunction plus subject plus verb. As there is a subordinate conjunction before the clause, so this is called dependent clause. As he was ill, it is also dependent clause because there is a subordinate conjunction before subject and verb. Please try to identify the next sentences. The following sentences here. Is it dependent or is it independent? If you know the structure, if you understand what I am saying, if you understand the definition of dependent and independent clauses, I'm sure you will identify the clauses. It is dependent or it is independent. So here I would like to finish my lesson. Hope see you again.